Let's meet today's panelists. And I believe they are standing by. There they are. They're all coming on now, appearing before us. And we'll make sure they can all hear us in just a minute. First, I would like to just reintroduce the man that we just watched the presentation of, Mr. Aza Raskin. I gave a few of his credits before the keynote, but he has more. He is a trained mathematician and dark matter physicist, a founder of Mozilla Labs, hosts the very popular podcast Your Undivided Attention, which we spoke about, and in his spare time, he briefs heads of state. Is that all true, Aza?
All of those things are true, but my mother is still not impressed.
You got to do one set of stand-up comedy to win her over. That's it. Thank you so much for joining us here today, sir.
Yeah.
From our title sponsor, Microsoft, we have the Senior Accessibility Technical Evangelist at Microsoft with over 15 years of experience working with the disability community, building trusted relationships with customers, NGOs, and assistive technology partners to further Microsoft's mission of empowering every person and organization to achieve more through the lens of inclusion. Joining us, we have Dr. Megan Lawrence. Dr. Lawrence, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me this morning.
I can't wait to get into this. Also, from Dell, our other co-title sponsor, Dell Technologies, we have a 20-year veteran of the company who has served as Canadian Channel Chief and National Director of Inside Sales before serving in his current role of delivering transformational solutions to your clients. Here is Andre Valiquette.
Hey, Steve.
Bon matin. Bon matin, Andre. Bon matin.
Merci.
And of course, I'm sorry, from Northern Micro, I believe this is someone that everyone should know. She's kindly going to serve not only as a panelist today, but a co-moderator, since I'm not at all sure what I'm talking about on all these questions. Please welcome President since 2019, Emily Martin. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Steve.
And hello, I want to say this. Good morning, Madame President. That feels good. That feels good to say that. We are going to moderate this panel together. And I just want to point out, we want to get to all the questions we can that people are submitting. So we know that there's going to be some further discussion to have on this, but I will just try to keep it moving in the interest of getting to as many questions as we can. So I just want to let everyone know that out of the gate. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Emily for the first question, please.
So our audience today, predominantly technologists that service the public sector. And as part of that responsibility, they're delivering and developing right now a lot of digital services for Canadians. And if you could just start us off by giving some top of mind thoughts that they should be bearing in mind while they're delivering those services, given the importance of the work that they're doing.
Mm-hmm. I think that, there's a point that I made in the talk that originally picked up from Larry Lessig, that code is law. And in fact, code is stronger than law, because with law, you get to decide whether you're going to break it or not. You can't, there's such a thing as civil disobedience, but with when you're making services, then people don't get to decide whether you use them or not, or whether they follow the rules or not. And so I think of all acts of coding that reach scale as, in a sense, inherently political. It's a little less strong when you think about it in terms of government services. And so the other things I'd be thinking about are, the way that somebody interfaces with a computer, like those little design decisions can have profound impacts both on individuals and on societies. And so I think that study of ergonomics, both at how the human being works, how the mind works, the study of cognetics, is sort of crucially important. The last thought that I'd add in here is, as our technology services become increasingly reliant on things like recommendation engines or AI, being able to understand how those services interact with the public at scale is sort of where we need to be moving as a field. That is, it's no longer enough just to do computer-human interaction, understand how computers interact with computer. We have to start thinking about the fractaled up version, technology-society interaction. And that's going to involve an entirely new set of tools and a new way of thinking about how we create software.
Thanks for that. Steve, did you want to ask the next question? Oh, you're on mute.
There I
Yes.
do. I'm sorry. I have a remote unmuting going on. So, this advanced technology. It's nice how it's slowed down our conversation. I will ask this to Andre and Megan if I could. It's one thing to be not on the outside, certainly in the industry where it is, but when you have to work and answer to shareholders and people in your organizations, does that change the role of the ethical implications of rapidly advancing technologies? Could you speak to that a little bit, please? Megan, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And, I've worked, as you mentioned, I've worked with the disability community for a long time. And traditionally, technology has been developed in ways that are not accessible for the 1 in 5 people that have a disability today. And so, one of the things that I think is incredibly important as we think about ethical development of technology is to bring the disability voice to that table. We have to live into the belief system that nothing about us without us is critical as we think about advancing technology, because the really good news that I have to share with all of you today is that if you don't have a disability yet, don't worry, you will.
Yeah, and I think what I would add to that would just be, when we talk about as a technology company, everything that we're doing in terms of implementing that technology, it comes back to the people and the culture that the employees have and how they're delivering services with our partner community to the customer base. And so we put a lot of emphasis around making sure that we do ethics compliance, making sure that we do a training that's called MARC training, which is Many Advocating Real Change, which talks a lot about our unconscious bias and how we interact with people and making sure that it's an inclusive and diverse culture. And we have some moonshot goals that we've also set to ensure that our culture and our talent pool is reflective of the market, of the industry, making sure that we have a balance of women and men and gender and all different representation of different groups to ensure that when we make decisions or when we're putting solutions in place for our customers, we're doing it with an inclusive culture and a diverse culture that's bringing to market a lot of those attributes embedded within the solutions.
Thanks for that, Andre. Just to add to that, because you're sharing some of the initiatives, obviously, that Dell has taken on. Back to Megan, can you share some of the initiatives Microsoft has taken on to establish a positive direction in the development of humane technology?
Yeah, I mean, Andre, I really loved your commentary around the culture in which technology gets developed. And as we begin to see that diversity, inclusion, and disability are incredibly key to the way that we build cultures of inclusion in which people have a real sense of belonging. But from a programmatic perspective, one of the things that we've done here at Microsoft is to create the Office of Responsible AI. In fact, we have a Chief Responsible AI Officer because we recognize just because you can build it doesn't mean that you should. And so all of our technology actually goes through, when using AI, goes through a responsible AI review in which we are holding ourselves to the type of standards that we want to see shared out in the world today. And I think that's incredibly important. As Aza said, this is a societal movement. This is one in which we cannot be siloed. And so I always say we're only as good as the feedback that we get from our own users, and that it is through partnership that we are ultimately going to make big changes that are positive, that would create a world in which we not only have a sustainable environment to continue to live in, but one in which technology will play a positive role. But it is through those partnerships that we begin to see the real power of humanity playing out in the technology that we can create.
Thanks so much, Megan. This one's for Aza, and it sort of relates to what Megan was talking about. Some of the countries that you've worked with have made a real effort to address some of the issues around misinformation in particular. And you mentioned it in your talk. Digital Minister for Taiwan, Audrey Tang, has led some really phenomenal initiatives around trying to address misinformation, which I think also relates to inclusion and how we absorb information. And I heard her speak about her, I guess it's the humor versus rumor campaign that they were running. And I just wondered if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of what you've learned and what might be helpful to this audience.
One of the things I love about Audrey Tang's work is that she's using the tools that are available to all of us, but and which seem like put democracies at a disadvantage, right? It feels like the openness of our societies are being exploited, both by people inside as well as outside as adversaries to take advantage and own the information ecosystem. And what her work shows is that you can actually use the exact same technologies to create a flourishing democracy. And one of my favorite examples of that is how they have systems which people enter ideas about what they think the government should be doing, um, uh, and in fact they created a whole set of like almost shadow services. Instead of .gov, they just made a citizens essentially made a set of shadow services that are better than the original government services at G0V. And so you just change whatever website you're going to on the government, you switch the O to a 0, and you end up at the better version. And that was only possible because the government opened up their APIs. And so one of the things she's working on is the ability to find unlikely consensus across broad groups of people. That as people enter ideas, folks from their equivalent of left and right, seeing the ideas that were places of consistency helps to build and mend the fences, and makes people less likely to fall to mis and disinformation. There's a sort of line of thinking, and I think this sort of gets to the heart of the problem, that in order to solve things like addiction, the answer often isn't just sobriety, it's human connection. That the driver for why people are addicted is because there's something lacking in their lives about connection and community. And we are the exact same vulnerable for mis and disinformation when we are disconnected, angry, polarized, and not feeling loved or embodied. And so there are these sort of standard ways of approaching mis and disinformation directly. And there's absolutely a lot we can do around changing the incentive structures of what kind of content gets promoted by recommendation systems. And also, there's the level down, the more fundamental, which is the re-knitting of the trust in our governance, which means that people are just, their condition is less likely to seek out the mis and disinformation.
Thanks. That's I think that's a really helpful way of looking at it. And when people get to see the extended version of your talk, you talk a little bit about this calm versus outrage piece that we need to sort of square. And I thought that it was really interesting to hear that as a country and as a digital minister, they're leveraging things like our human inability to feel outrage at the same time as we find something funny. And so I thought for the follow-up to that question, I would actually kick it over to Steve, because this is something that he does for a living. He, looks at what's going on in the public here in Canada and tries to make it funny. And I'd love to hear from you, Steve. How do you think something like this would play out in Canada?
Well, I would. This is the first that I'm hearing of it. And by the way, it is nice to talk about something for a minute that I actually know a little bit about. This is a nice, refreshing change for me in this. But I would love to see Canada take a bigger role in this and bring more comedians and humorists and humor writers into the AI world, because this is what we do. We're interacting with it now like we never have before. And there's something to be said for we've put all of our time into trying to get funny messages out and laughing at things that you don't think you can laugh at. And humor, I don't have the studies behind me, but I think that everyone does want to feel humor. And when you're entertained, you don't even realize that you're learning, so you learn more. So I would love to see Canada take a bigger role in this. If only I could find an organization that would partner with a comedian to do this. Like a Microsoft or a Dell or something. But I would love to see more comedians and entertainers interacting with AI, because I think that's an untapped resource right now. It would help people understand more things. So I'd love to see that. Let's jump on. No one here is listening to wants to hear me. Let's get back into the AI stuff here. I'll start with Aza with this question, but I would love to hear from everybody. We touched very briefly on accessibility issues, and especially working with people with disabilities. There's obviously huge opportunities there in AI, but I personally have never thought of the other side of it, where if there's AI interactions for people with disabilities, that people would exploit that. So
Yeah.
how can we ensure and make sure that we get the use of AI right for all people, regardless of their accessibility challenges? Aza, can we start with you on that?
hmm I loved Megan's point about needing a plurality of people, of all different cognitive abilities, to in order to make technology that works for us. It's sort of like um, making AI without having representation means we're going to get an increasing runaway feedback loop. Um, so. Uh, what one example of this, and this isn't in directly disability space and accessibility, but more than 70% of Facebook's users are outside of the US and Canada. And what does that mean? That means most of the designers, um, when they imagine what person they're developing for, they're thinking of the wrong person. And how can you possibly make software or AI that works well if the image of who you're making for is wrong? And the only way to solve that is by having a diverse set of voices, a diverse set of perspectives that come together. Um, and the second thing is that we cannot rely just on ethics alone, because no one is going to say, hey, I am unethical. Everyone's going to say, like, no, I'm working on this ethically. And in fact, when you read the CPCC documents on the development of AI, right, like China's Communist Party, the CCP rather, uh, it reads, you go down it, and it sounds like exactly something that Canada or the US would write. It's about protecting sovereign human rights. It's about doing the right thing for society. What we also have to be doing is measuring the actual outcomes, not just hoping that they work out, because these systems are complex. And that means there are a number of consequences that are very hard to foresee. Um, and so this involves everything from, at the beginning, doing something sort of like an environmental impact report, but a societal impact report for what your technology will do, and then trying to measure to see where the harms are, and reintegrating the people closest to the pain to be closest to the power.
That's an incredible answer, and I hope everyone takes that to heart. I'm going to just point out at this point that we would like to encourage other people to submit their questions via the chat function as well, so we can get to some of those. So if you have some questions, please put them in the chat section. Meantime, I'm still on the same question, and Megan, maybe you could talk a little bit more specifically now about what Microsoft is doing to increase the AI accessibility for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think this bleeds a little bit into some of the questions we have later in the program, but I'm just going to launch in here a little bit, which is, at the end of the day, the machine learning and AI is run on data. And so not only do we have to have a diverse set of developers that are using AI to develop a new piece of technology, but in fact, that data needs to be reflective of the people within society. And the bottom line is we have a data desert. We just don't know enough about people with disabilities to suggest that we're honestly going to create inclusive, accessible technology. And so our AI for Accessibility team is a $25 million grant team that is really bringing together some of the top university researchers, startups, businesses, some of the best thinkers in the world today to begin to really tackle this question, to say, how do we build databases that include people with disabilities? How do we make sure we do that in a way where we are not infringing on people's privacy or their security? And these are large scale questions that I think we really are just beginning to ask ourselves. And so I really come back to that concept of, what does it mean to ethically get data from a diverse set of people so that we are ensuring that the next generation of technology is actually reducing barriers for people with disabilities, and we don't find ourselves in another moment of the internet where in fact all of these wonderful websites popped up and very few of them were accessible, and we're still fighting the challenges of getting people to just make their website accessible. So I think it's actually a very exciting time. Maybe I'm overly optimistic, but to me, the fact that we're asking ourselves these questions, the fact that we're having this conversation today, means that we're drawing awareness, and we're beginning to really dig in to the heart of the matter.
Thanks, Megan. And Andre, I know that Dell has been named one of the top ethical companies in the AI field the last several years running. What things are you doing to get that kind of notice, and what more are you working on?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's actually two aspects to this, and I'll just piggyback exactly in line with what Aza and Megan have talked about, which is a lot of the applications that we use that have AI or machine learning built into them are largely based off of data and those data lakes, right? And so, there's a couple aspects to this in mind. So I'm a father of twins, and both who have disabilities, and they're in wheelchairs, and they have a different version of FA. Not the same FA that you described in terms of continuum, but it's called Friedreich's ataxia, and it's a neuromuscular condition. And so they're losing their mobility. And I see their interaction with smart devices, with speech to text, and all of those are based on AI and machine learning. And so one of the areas of focus for Dell has been, this information. How do we secure it? How do we make sure that that information? We have services that prevent intrusions, and we have a data protection aspect of our portfolio of products that is focused around securing that data. So I see both sides, both as a parent and seeing my children who use online learning, use speech to text, use these AI and machine learning based technologies. And then I also see the other side when Dell's involved in from an initiative standpoint, just making sure that data is compliant, that we're using data to derive the right ethical and proper outcomes. And it comes back again to the culture that we create. It's everything that we do from a technology standpoint. We want to make sure that we do our annual certifications, and that's a requirement for every employee as well.
Thank you, Andre.